Hello, welcome to another episode of Variance Betting. My name is Ted Knutson. Today we're going to cover the Premier League bets for the weekend of the 14th of February. All we want for Valentine's Day is to win all our bets this weekend. Simple enough request, right? Join us. I want to let you know about our partnership with Bet105. Bet105 is a book for winning players. They have reduced juice, which we've talked about many times on here. You can review some of the past episodes, but it's the most important thing as a gambler. You want to pay less to the bookie, and you can't make that up in bonuses. You need to have better gambling margins, and so reduced juice is a big deal. No rollover requirements there. Withdrawals are easy. It's crypto-based, so be aware of that, but crypto is pretty easy and widely available everywhere now. Good withdrawal times, and you get actual support from humans. So we've got a partnership with them, and as part of the partnership, they run these awesome promos. Not only do they let you win, but they will give you -103, -103, or 1.97, 1.97 odds from 1 to 6 this week for the English Premier League. So last week was La Liga when it was an FA Cup weekend. They also had this awesome Super Bowl promo. This is world best pricing. And as part of our agreement and partnership with them, we've managed to find a way so that you guys can get 5 hours of the best pricing on the biggest betting league in the world. So follow the link in the show notes to sign up. We do get a tiny little fee for that. But the funny thing is we could never get anything else because you guys win too much. And so that's great. That was the whole point of it. And it's been exciting to not only help people win, but also get them better prices on their other potential bets that they're making. Right. We're going to hop in and I'm going to talk a little bit this week about the analysis first, but I'm also going to give you some lessons and some reads that I made over the course of the last week on our social media. So I'm at Mixed Canuts. I've been there for, 25 years across the various platforms that have existed. And obviously we have the transfer flow for Twitter and Blue Sky. We've got all the different things that you see hop across the chyrons there on TikTok and Instagram. I think those are the main ones. And obviously YouTube, so which is where you're at, probably, possibly, could be. So we do the YouTube shorts and and the long form podcasts on Mondays, Wednesdays, and you get this drivel from me on Fridays. So Friday night bet. That means those of you who have fantasy teams want to get your lineups in now because it's going to be too late by the time this thing kicks off. Brighton is at home versus Chelsea. Now, Brighton have an injury list and have had basically the same length of injury list the entire season, which is kind of a problem because they've had very few times where they've had the full starting 11, and in cases like Lewis Dunk, it's actually someone who's quite important. Kadioglu, I think, is out for another extended period of time, has barely had a good run of health and a bunch of other guys are injured too. Now they have a deep squad, but the chopping and changing has been a problem. Hertzler and the kids have been slightly naive in how they've managed games, and so don't really know what to expect from them. And then you get a Chelsea team that's been quite good, but despite the fact that they have had a very strong rotation policy and a very deep squad, they are now missing a ton of guys, including probably their two best center backs, or at least two of their three best center backs, and Nico Jackson, and then also one of their backup strikers too. So Nkunku's probably going to lead the line, which is a totally fine player to lead the line, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's not first choice. Jackson probably could have used a little more rest as it was anyway. I'm looking at this, and the line would probably be about here without the injuries. And then when you do the injury adjustments, it's still about here. So I don't have any bets on this one, but it's worth noting that injuries can have a pretty significant impact on our evaluation of whether a line is correct or worth betting on. And back in the gambling days, when I worked at one of the syndicates or the gambling hedge funds, the best players in the world are only worth so much. And in fact, Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, when they were out of the lineup by themselves, were worth probably a little over a quarter goal. Significant, but probably less than you might expect it to be. Now, part of that is because they often have quite good backups, given the teams that they were on. And they have other players that can carry the weight if those players were out. But also, it just comes back around to say that certain players have an impact on the game. In mathematical terms, on the lines, it might be a little less than you might expect it to be. That's all. Saturday, leading things off on Saturday, you get Leicester, who've basically been terrible most of the season, and Arsenal. Now, Arsenal have not been terrible most of the season. They've ground out pretty good results despite the fact that they've had weird red card situations. They've had missing players. They've lost Saka. for a lot of the season. And now they went on a holiday break to give the squad a refresh, to take some time away from the intensity of the season because they weren't in the domestic cups. And Kai Havertz has torn his hamstring, and it seems to be out for the entire season and possibly deep into the summertime. You could not write a worse script for Arsenal this season. And it happens to teams sometimes. It happens where, Liverpool seem to lose a ton of players after one of their big point seasons, and players get injured. Arsenal had a deep run last year, nearly got a title, and then different issues early in the season, have had consistent injury problems across most of their positions. It's resulted in two of their academy players coming to the fore that they might not have seen otherwise, which is quite useful and valuable. But it's still causing real problems. So on this game, I am on Leicester at plus 1.5. I would not be without the injuries, but I do think that you need to have like capable forwards across all the positions in order to cover these big handicaps away. And I think that Arsenal may struggle. Now, they may not, because Leicester find ways to be terrible, but because we are professional sports bettors, we wince and then push the button on making these bets. Continuing with the Saturday slate, we have Fulham versus Forest. Now, those of you who've been reading the newsletter for a while, this is the Variance Betting newsletter, but also our the Transfer Flow newsletter, know that these two teams have very similar metrics and actually very similar kind of styles of play and remarkably similar outputs this season, although one's a bit higher up in the table than the other one. So I just think that this is like the two Spider-Man meme. And this line looks pretty much perfect for me. I don't see any reason to get involved on either side. Going way down south, you get a South Coast derby, as it were. Southampton, who are terrible, are facing Bournemouth, who are very much not terrible, to the extent that they are 1-goal favorites away in the Premier League this year, which I think is remarkable and kind of like totally unexpected. It does speak a little bit to how bad Southampton have been. But also there's just this element. Yeah, they're really good. And this is a shock. And this line does not look out of place. Impressive. Congratulations to everybody there involved. As you know, they have a hot coach that may end up moving along this year, but in contention for European slots. Little old Bournemouth, like their stadium's like 12,000 people. It's crazy. Doesn't feel like that should be possible. All right, Aston Villa versus Ipswich. This is minus 1.25. So I think this line is just right, as long as Ollie Watkins is not out, because I don't think that they have a decent center forward that can replace him. And he was somewhere between 50 and 75% to be fine for this match. Like, check the lineups if you're involved. If the lineups don't have Watkins in it, because they don't have John Duran, he's been sold, then you're probably looking at a plus 1.25 bet on Ipswich. Now, you may not get that anymore, but if this line was the same and Watkins were out, we would bet Ipswich here as a value bet. It's not like exciting. They're away. They're very capable of getting beaten up pretty badly. The question is whether Aston Villa is capable of beating teams up badly right now, and it's kind of on the edge. All right, the biggest, probably best match, at least from a technical perspective and not a traditional perspective, which is the last match of the slate, is Manchester City versus Newcastle. The line here is basically a flat -0.5, which means that Manchester City are pretty much 50-50 to win this match outright. City have been doing okay. We obviously the the midweek match was really fun, and I enjoyed that. And if you looked at our analysis from the podcast, or you've read my gambling analysis, you know that I was on Real Madrid at +0.5, so Real Madrid to win or draw. And I really difficultly debated a Real Madrid outright at like plus 248, I think was what the price was at the time. And I chose not to bet it. And then I just had the horrible sweats for the whole evening, as that match was totally crazy. And it turned out that betting it would have paid off, and actually would have felt like the best of it, because like Real Madrid definitely had them on the ropes a lot during the course of that match. Even when City were leading, I didn't feel like I had chosen the wrong side on that match. Now, all of that is a long way of saying City are still messy, but they're not bad. And the reason why I kind of have a lean on City here, I'm not betting this. It would take probably City at 2.05 or plus 105 on the half for me to get involved. But the reason why I kind of lean City is one, I think they're good, and two, Newcastle are missing Joe Linton for a bit, and I think he's really important, and he's a big physical mismatch for City. If he were around, I think this line actually might be shaded a little more towards Newcastle, because I think that Newcastle fully healthy with their starting 11 and a good midfield means that they can have more control over this game than most teams do against City. But given he's out, I think that they might find it quite challenging. Gordon is supposed to be healthy and no problem, so like that's useful. But anyway, either way, I don't have a bet on it. But my read is that I would have a lean on City if this price were a little more towards Newcastle. And to be honest, given how bad City have been for 3-4 months now, basically since Rodri went down, like the 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 models that create the lines have so much legacy data in there. Like they've really struggled. I'm surprised that this is still where it's at. But they should be fine by the time the City fully recover and become good again. Maybe. We'll see. That could also not be until the summer. I don't know. Right. West Ham versus Brentford. I have a small lean on West Ham in this match, but they have enough injuries that I can't pull the trigger. Ferguson doesn't have match fitness. Somerville's still out. Fulkrug, who knows when we'll see him. And then like same thing for Mikel Antonio, although probably further out than that. So I kind of have a small lean on West Ham, but we're not there yet. If you have the same sort of read and you want a bit of a roll of the dice at the 0 draw no bet, like it's not an unreasonable one. Brentford are pretty good, but their away performances have been terrible. Maybe they decide to play this match in a different way and they get a little more aggressive on it. Not sure. That could actually be dangerous for West Ham. I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued by it. I might even watch it, but not in the stadium because it's cold in England this weekend. So I don't need to be way out there in that horrible stadium. Speaking of stadiums in London, Crystal Palace have a home match against Everton. And this is one of the few bets that we have. So the bet that I had earlier was Leicester City plus 1.5. This one, we're on Palace. Palace, despite their season-long numbers, are finally at the point where they were pretty much with Glasner last year. For like half a season, they were really good and they had decent control over matches. They're kind of back to that spot, and that's kind of where I have their numbers at. And Everton haven't changed much in the underlying numbers since swapping Sean Dyche for David Moyes. He's not the Spanish version. David Moyes. I'm just here to make myself laugh. That's all. Yeah. So Crystal Palace and Everton. I have Palace at -0.5. And one of the big reasons here is because Doucouré was suspended from the Merseyside derby. Njai picked up an MCL injury that could be worse than that. They haven't given a full prognosis on it. So Everton are back to being really injured. And given that, and given how good Palace have been, like this is a pretty clean bet for me on Crystal Palace. Now, as a professional gambler, sometimes it's frustrating to go through like a 10-game slate of games in the Premier League and be like, oh, there's only 2 bets here. This sucks. Like I did all this work, which I did do a lot of work. I do a lot of work every time for these. Did all this work and there's nothing there for me. But the reality is like showing discipline and not just sort of chasing some action is what we call degenerate gambler behavior, is chasing action because you want to have a sweat, you want to have a feel. Like I only bet things that are plus EV, like that we've got an edge on. And that's one reason why we've done so well this year and done so well throughout my history doing this stuff. So I have discipline on this one. I'm kind of leaving it alone. Those of you who, need a sweat, it's frustrating. I get it. But thankfully, if you subscribe to the Variance Betting newsletter, you will find 6 championship bets this weekend. So half of the card, we've got bets in English Championship. Pretty exciting if you like Championship. Typically, that's been my best league so far, although I had a good run in the Champions League this time around as well. Long may that continue. You never know. So things have been going pretty well. And you'll see that in a couple of slides when we do the roundup. Liverpool versus Wolves. Given all of the late red cards from the Merseyside derby, including to multiple coaching staff, I have to wonder if there's actually going to be staff allowed on the bench for this one, or if players are basically going to have to coach themselves like a 5-a-side, like just direct each other whichever way they need to. Liverpool have basically a clean bill of health. They've had it pretty much all season long. Awesome for them. Wolves are messy. Like I don't know why you'd want to bet this. Like maybe you like Liverpool. Wolves are not the worst team. It's not like this is Southampton, right? Like, and if this were Southampton, it'd probably be 2.75. So, yeah, I didn't have anything here. And then we get the last game of the weekend, which traditionally might even be excited. You might be excited to be like, oh, it's Spurs versus Manchester United. This is brilliant. Let's check this out. And then you look and you see that it's the 13th versus 14th place teams in the league, pretty deservedly. Spurs continue to have like 11 players on the injured or potentially doubtful list, which is why they are down where they are in the table. They're getting close to getting some of them back, so give it a couple of weeks. I think that March should potentially be a much better month for them. And United are boring and still very much in flux. They don't have the pieces that they need to play the style, so you're seeing them drag along. Presumably, they've paid enough to Ruben Amorim that they will continue with him. But there was a really spicy little hit piece on Ineos, but a little bit on Barada and Wilcox in FootBiz this week on Friday, actually today. So if you're interested, it's a good newsletter to get some insider scoop on what's happening in and around football. It's written by some pretty good longtime journalists and editorial from people that are quite connected. Don't always agree with what's in there, but it's pretty well done. So credit to them. Anyway, if you want to see some behind the scenes frustration with what's going on at Ineos, including potentially Jim Ratcliffe not really having any money anymore, maybe it's there. Anyway, on this game, I would not bet either side. I don't trust either of these. Like, sure, Spurs are at home. They're not very healthy. United don't beat up anybody. So, like, why would you do this to yourself? Like, you don't even need to watch it. Like, just go for a walk, go for a sunset walk, take the dog out, hang out with your girlfriend or boyfriend, whichever it is. It's Valentine's Day weekend. Like, maybe you've got a trip away. That's awesome. The card isn't that exciting. We don't even have that much sweat. So maybe that's the fun thing you do this weekend. I don't know. Running totals. We've been doing really well, but February has mostly been sort of spinning our wheels. So until this midweek, I think we were down maybe 2 bets, and then we had a really good midweek, and so we're up a bet effectively. Now there are 400 subscribers on variance betting, and we are betting $1 per subscriber on the variance betting. So we're already up to $400 stakes, which is nice. Thank you for the support. We were sort of plus 1250 this week, only plus 300 for February, but January was plus 5,000. So that's a pretty sick one. Only 2 bets in play in the Premier League this weekend. Sad trombone, but 6 in the English champ. So if you want to see those, subscribe to variance betting. And we've got about $3,400 riding on the bets this weekend. So yeah, we could see some good stuff happen. Could see some downswings. It'd be fun to have more, but you got to wait. You got to wait till the time's right for the plus EV. Before we wrap up, I wanted to sort of state kind of 2 things that I was ahead of the curve on, and one of which I didn't even realize. So last week Friday in the newsletter, I wrote that I was tempted by the over on West Brom and Plymouth. Those 2 teams combined for 3.5 expected goals, all in the second half. West Brom lost at Plymouth at the death. Worked out in my favor. And then it says they aren't playing this weekend in the championship, which is what I was referring to at the time. And I haven't fully made sense of it, but Argyle are pretty interesting live dogs right now. That continued to be the case because they beat Liverpool 2 days later. And then they also had a big win at home midweek. So pretty interesting stuff where like sometimes you can get ahead of the curve. You can say a thing. You're like, ooh, I'm intrigued by this. Like I need to dig into it more. And then immediately like those reads come true. On the midweeks, I posted this on my social media so like people could see it. All this stuff is public. Like if you're my whole gambling record for this season is public in that I've written a couple of pieces. It's in people's inboxes. Like you can't go back and re-edit the website to fake the shit. Like it's in their inboxes. Like there's historic information there, and our gambler followers are very happy. So that's been nice because helping people win is fun, and getting back into this has been fun too. So on the Champions League stuff that I was trying to dig into, I was looking to say Feyenoord or Messi, they fired their head coach on Monday while we were recording the podcast. This might be a good time to bet on Milan. Let's look at Milan to make sure that that makes sense before we make that bet. And I don't really like to bet teams that are kind of in flux. I would obviously, if you bet Feyenoord and you bet Dortmund this past week, you would have been very happy. So that would have worked out for you. But I typically stay away because, again, confidence and uncertainty. But then I looked at Milan's record versus top of the table teams, and this is the whole of what is supposedly a pretty decent Serie A this year, but they haven't necessarily looked that way in Europe. And they have two good wins across the whole of that. And they would have needed to win at Feyenoord in order to cover it this midweek. They have a win against Milan in a derby back in September, and then they had the win at the Bernabeu against Real Madrid in the Swiss stages, and then nothing that have been outright wins. So really chaotic stuff. And so I dodged that, and obviously it worked out because they lost to Feyenoord. But this is the type of stuff that these are the threads that you want to pull on because sometimes teams change pretty quickly on you when they change a head coach, like Plymouth did. And sometimes there's this aura about a team where they're like, oh, they're pretty good because they're in the Champions League knockout stage. They beat Real Madrid at home. They're doing fine in their league, blah, blah, blah. And then you look at it and you're like, man, they don't beat anybody. Like they're feasting on the small teams, and that's the only thing that's keeping them where they're at in the table. And they're just not very good right now. And so that was what I got to see here. And thankfully it saved me some money on a midweek bet. Thank you for listening to the Friday Valentine's Day made up holiday for consumers and people that are heartbroken holiday version of variance betting. If you like our content, we have a free daily newsletter at thetransferflow.com/subscribe. It's also down in the show notes. And I also write a variance betting analysis, which is a more of a weekly, bi-weekly column that does gambling analysis for the English Premier League, English Championship, and the UEFA Champions League. We're having a great run. That's probably why you're here, because you're interested in what we have to say on that. We have championship bets in there. We have market implied odds that are available only to subs. The Champions League stuff is only to subscribers as well. But you see me covering the Premier League stuff here pretty much weekly. So transferflow.com, we do a lot of transfer analysis when the transfer season's there. Sometimes we do wrap-ups of weird stuff that we think is there, but we do also do just like team analysis. What should you be paying attention to? Should Spurs fan be sad? Will they be sad forever? Should Arsenal fans be sad? Or was it kind of a decent idea that their ownership did not spend a bunch of money, 60 million, on 29-year-old Ollie Watkins in January? I don't know. But we cover it there in more detail. Thank you very much for listening this time around, and good luck on all your bets this weekend.